A short disclaimer. In the article and script, some words were added in the recorded testimonies for clarification. In the articles, these appear in parentheses and in italics and consist of personal pronouns. We come now to the testimonies of Mr. and Mrs. Sylvan Taylor, Dr. Taylor's son, and his wife. The first thing we notice about both testimonies in the transcript is that they begin with the writing style which we have associated as possible evidence that the transcript has been edited before being sent to the appellate court. We have mentioned this several times, but up until now, we have not explained what that evidence is. With most of the testimony given in this transcript of the trial, the testimony begins with the phrase, quote, "The witness testified as follows," unquote. The first 6 witnesses called by the prosecution is missing this phrase. Consequently, those 6 witnesses ending with the testimony of Jane Mullins are the only true witnesses that the prosecutor, Robert Bruce, would present in his case. As most of the other witnesses presented by Bruce read like they were in some way testifying for the defense. But if one is extremely well versed in the often told story of the Killing Rock, as well as the newspaper articles from before, during, and after the Pound Gap Massacre, these first 6 witnesses stand out from the rest of the transcript. Not only are they missing the phrase, quote, "The witness testified as follows," unquote, but they are also full of discrepancies, redactions, and or omissions. They also read like someone writing a commentary or a summary of these testimonies rather than someone recording the actual testimony of a witness. For instance, these testimonies all begin with the phrase, quote, "The witness testified that," unquote. The first 2 witnesses for the prosecution, Robert Mullins and John Vint Bentley, had conducted the original crime scene investigation. These men do describe the crime scene in their recorded testimonies, although there is no mention in the transcript that they were the only persons to officially investigate that crime scene. The transcript also omits the fact that Bentley was a Kentucky magistrate, and, as far as the inquest goes, the transcript says that Bentley testified that, quote, "They held an inquest over their bodies in Kentucky," unquote. No mention or hint that Bentley had been the person who performed that inquest on May 15th as part of his magisterial duties. But there are other problems with these first 6 testimonies as well. The testimony of Robert Mullins also gives us information on the caliber size of the bullet casings found at the crime scene. We are also given a small list of suspects based on this evidence. These suspects were known to own a weapon that matches these casings. Except now we know that the evidence recorded in the transcript was not correct and more than likely edited. We know this from the often told tale and the affidavit attached to the transcript of the trial. The often told story tells us that the casings were rimfire and from a government-issued rifle. The rim-fired issue is verified in the affidavit from I.N. Mills, which was attached to its transcript. Additionally, we have recently been able to track down and verify the type and caliber of the rifle owned by Henry Adams. Henry is one of the suspects named at the crime scene and in this testimony by Robert Mullins. The rifle owned by Adams is a .44 caliber Winchester. According to his daughter, the rifle is now owned by her nephew and uses a .44 WCF Winchester centerfire variant. This rifle, if it is the WCF variant, is a gun that is almost as rare as Taylor's rifle. The other issues with the ammunition casings and the rifle are covered in our Doc's Gun articles and videos. But as we have said, there are other problems with these first 6 testimonies. Unfortunately, these problems and others continue elsewhere in the transcript of the trial. After discovering who Ruben McFall was and his testimony, amidst things including that he was a deputy. We were compelled to look deeper into his testimony and others, which began with the phrase, quote, "The witness testified that," unquote. What we have found is that with each testimony that begins with this manner contained discrepancies, redactions, and or omissions. This brings us back to the testimonies of Hattie and Sylvan Taylor. It is hard to note exactly where to start with the testimonies of Hattie and Sylvan. Both testimonies start with a version of the phrase, quote, "The witness testified," unquote, and reads like a summary or commentary of their testimonies. The often told story tells us that Dr. Taylor was helped to board the train to Bluefield, West Virginia by his son Sylvan. Other than that simple statement, we really have no guide to provide clues as to any possible editing. This is where we must draw on everything we know about the Pound Gap Massacre, and, in doing so, several things stand out. The testimony of Hattie Taylor. The witness testified that she was the daughter-in-law of Dr. Taylor and lived at Norton. That she saw Dr. Taylor on the Saturday before his arrest. He had started to leave the country, came to her house about 2 or 3 o'clock at night, and left on Monday morning following. Said it was on her husband's account and her own that he was going to leave. They didn't have money to spare to go through a trial and didn't want to have the worry and trouble of being hauled around to court. Said he objected to leaving and wanted to stay and stand his trial. Out of everything in Hattie's testimony, the only thing that stands out is that she says here about a trial, although Dr. Taylor may very well have left due to his concern for his son and his wife. She says that she and her husband did not want to deal with the cost and the trouble associated with the trial. This may or may not be true. The curious thing here is a jump from the questioning about Dr. Taylor and a trial to questioning about clothing and money. Sylvan Taylor testified to the same and almost exact wording, stating he, quote, advised his father to leave because he was not able to spare the money for a trial and did not want to go through the trouble and suspense of a trial, unquote. However, in Sylvan's testimony, that statement is contradictory, as we shall see. Remember that this is about a week after the famous botched arrest or shootout at the cliffs of the Cumberland. Neither Doc Taylor, the Fleming brothers, or Henry Adams had behaved like they were men on the run until this point, 2 months after the Pound Gap Massacre. Back to the testimony of Hattie Taylor. She testified that she and her husband furnished him $60 and that he had $24, and her husband had bought him a new suit of clothes, hat, shoes, socks, and underwear, and everything a man wore. His hat was of a different style from what he usually wore, and his clothes that he had were in tatters. She further stated that he had started to Florida and then intended going west. During the time he stayed at her house, he stayed in a lumber room over her kitchen and was not out during the time that she knew of. That she handed his meals to him up through the floor of said lumber room. Unlike Hattie, it was quite easy to spot a few discrepancies and possible omissions from the testimony of Sylvan Taylor. In fact, there is much going on in the testimony of Sylvan Taylor that we have decided to break this video and make it a 2-part video series due to time limitations. We at Kentucky Tennessee Living wish to thank you for reading and watching our series on the Killing Rock. Don't forget to hit that like button, as the more likes we receive, the more likely YouTube is to suggest our videos to other viewers. Also, to receive notification of future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon for notifications. We thank you for continuing to support Kentucky Tennessee Living as we bring to you the history of the Appalachian Mountains. We must remind everyone that the story names Killing Rock, the Oft-Told Tale, Killing Rock, the Untold Story, Killing Rock, the Trial, and Killing Rock, the Defense are all under Kentucky Tennessee Living copyright.